No other genre enjoys screwing with your head as much as horror. I mean, after all, the only mandatory requirement for a horror story is that it gives you the willies. Not like that. They are the oldest stories in the world, from a time before language itself, born through an instinctive, primal urge to keep ourselves alive. Horror is the embodiment of fear, really, whether that is pain through stomach-churning gore, the unknown through shadowy settings, or even the fear of fear itself through some of the more bizarre proclivities put to screen. The thing is, though, so much about fear is irrational. It doesn't make sense in any logical way, like trypophobia flaring up when you see humble seed pods, or the unneeded spike of adrenaline that comes from seeing the ocean and thinking nothing but Kraken. So in the same vein, putting horror to film doesn't always make sense either. Some of the most disturbing movies have utterly impenetrable plots, but that only makes them all the more terrifying to attempt to dig into. Try as we might, there's things out there we don't understand. But do we really want to? I am the enigmatic Ash from What Culture, and these are 10 horror movies nobody understands. 10. Tetsuo the Iron Man, 1991. This low-budget horror is a psychosexual acid trip, which is a fancy way of saying it's a mess of sex and gore in all the right ways. It tells the story of a Japanese office worker who crosses paths with a metal fetishist intent on gradually turning himself into a machine, and who manages to get himself transformed as a result of running him over. Sounds fair to me. Those are the bare bones of the plot, but the execution is something else. It veers wildly between the subgenres of body horror and cyberpunk, combining all things fleshy with all things not in a horrible combination of metal and bodies. If that doesn't sell you, then there's also a bit where his dick becomes a drill. It's good though, I think. Tetsuo the Iron Man might have a lot to say about the speed of industrialization in modern Japanese culture, but whether you can bear to watch it enough times to figure out what any of it really means is another story. 9. Mother, 2017. Darren Aronofsky always intended this weird allegorical story to be a film that required work to get to the bottom of, and that is definitely what he has done. Mother hits you hard and doesn't let up. It just gets more and more intense, with creeping dread gradually shifting into actual horror as the story gets wilder and weirder. Jennifer Lawrence and Javier Bardem play an unnamed married couple with a muse/poet relationship, and that's a full extent of what we get to know. Unlike most horror, Mother isn't a film about bad things happening to good people, or even people at all. Instead, we're presented with a surreal, grim mindfuck about the clashing traditional narrative of good and bad choices, cause and effect, and a horrible cycle that is impossible to break free of. Is she Mother Nature? Is he mankind, or a deity, or a simple creator? Maybe, but then Aronofsky sticks a wider religious template across the environmental metaphor he's put in to really shake things up. Really, it's more of an experience than a movie, and like all modern art, you take away what you want to, just whether you like that or not is totally up to personal preference. 8. Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me, 1992. Twin Peaks was an uneasy combination of daytime soap opera and murder mystery, since the series constantly walked the line without stepping too far into the abyss of David Lynch's true heart of weirdness. And then, Fire Walk with Me came along to fix that. The film just straight hoists itself off the edge and into the bizarre, complicating the story we already knew rather than expanding on it like any normal prequel would. The weirder aspects of the TV show are upgraded to full-on crazy. I mean, the dancing dwarf in the Black Lodge turns out to be Mike's missing arm. What? And then Killer Bob's motivation for all the horror it inflicts is to feed on something called garmonbozia, the pain and sorrow in the human soul, visually represented by creamed corn. Making sense of the film means scrutinising everything in and around it as much as the film itself. Without getting every crumb together and piecing it into something understandable at the end, Fire Walk with Me is a real confusing ride. And even with the crumbs, we've still not got much hope of truly getting it. It is David Lynch through and through. 7. Triangle, 2009. A slasher crossed with Groundhog Day, Triangle is a good time as much as it is a confusing one. The twist is that Melissa George's protagonist, Jess, is both final girl and killer on a ship at different points in a time loop. Or at least she probably is, anyway. You see, the time loop isn't a science fiction concept, but more of a metaphysical one, aka one that bends reality, which we can see from the cumulative effects of every single loop, like the piles of identical corpses. This would only be possible if Jess were the only person being looped. But she's not, because the other 5 people on the boat are also affected. This ship is named Aeolus, after the father of Sisyphus, the mythical sinner sentenced to an eternity of pushing a boulder up a hill over and over again. The ending of Triangle does imply that Jess is being punished as well, but that doesn't explain why the others are there with her, unless they're part of the punishment. But are they even real? Jess never meets the conditions for escaping the loop, if there are any, so we can never know the truth of her situation. Is she doomed to repeat it forever? And just how many more corpses can the ship actually hold? 6. Carnival of Souls, 1962. Protagonist Mary Henry is the only survivor after her car plunges off a bridge into torrential waters. Moving to Salt Lake City, she is haunted by nightmarish spectral figures and drawn to an abandoned circus pavilion by the lake shore, until she finally enters to see herself dancing with the ghouls and disappears, leaving nothing but footprints in the sand. Then, we eventually see the car pulled from the river with Mary's body inside. For nearly 60 years, film fans have obsessed over what the twist ending actually means for the narrative of the rest of the film. Did Mary hallucinate the whole Utah experience in the last few moments of her life, or was she just a ghost roaming around? Perhaps Salt Lake City represents a kind of purgatory. But if so, why does she vanish? Surely she's right where she should be. Sadly, director Herc Harvey died in 1996 and took the correct interpretation of the movie to the grave with him. Considering the themes of life and death in this movie, that seems only appropriate. 5. Halawa, 2016. This creepy psychological horror follows Nathan, a loner suffering from crippling agoraphobia who hasn't left his flat in 3 years. He has a tentative friendship, then romance with the girl next door, but the trouble is, Nathan may not live alone after all. Ooh. Turns out his roommate is a monstrous force which compels poor old Nathan to commit appalling, gruesome murders whilst he's unaware. You know, either that or he's insane, since there's glimpses of a dark, ugly figure lurking in the periphery. Then there is the end. Caught literally red-handed, locked up and handcuffed, Nathan sees the Halawa in the police station and blacks out. When he returns to himself, the cuffs are off, the police are all dead, and a moment later, Nathan himself is gone. So did the Halawa manifest physically to free Nathan? Has it been real all along? Did it murder the cops, or did Nathan? Or did someone else spring him? And that is not even getting into the speculation about what the Halawa actually is. The devil? God? Who knows at this point? 4. The Neon Demon, 2016. A rather literal comment on the cannibalistic nature of the fashion industry, Nicholas Winding reckons The Neon Demon feels like 2 movies in one. Following Jessie, a 16-year-old aspiring model who's loved for her youth and beauty and then eaten by her jealous older friends, The Neon Demon could have left it there, as a cold critique of a world obsessed with beauty like vampires are obsessed with blood, with both just as hungry. Yet Refn sticks so much occult imagery around the edges that there seems to be another film in there too. The 3 older women who befriend, murder and eat Jessie are a coven in every sense of the word. Or at least, you'd think so from the way the film presents itself as a ritual with all of its careful references to a wider power at play. Are they witches? Do they literally watch a teenager rise to fame and then take her power for themselves to succeed? Or is it simply looking too far into a film that is supposed to be as vapid as the fashion it riffs on? It is impossible to tell, but part of what makes the movie so compelling. 3. Uzumaki, 2000. Now, this one is on this list for a different reason to its confusing pals, since Uzumaki, or Spiral, does what it says on the tin, and fixates on spirals in the form of the numbers 6 and 9, nice, along with the uncanny idea of physical transformation into snails. The problem with understanding it comes mostly from production, as this adaptation was shot in 2 weeks from a script written only months before the manga came to a conclusion. This shows itself mainly in the ending, as like some sort of J-horror Final Destination, Uzumaki just goes all out on the spiral-influenced high-concept deaths whilst leaving plenty of other threads behind. We never see what happens to the film's protagonist, Kiri, and we never see a resolution to the curse or to the narrative. Instead, the director simply left the story unfinished for fans and critics to speculate as to what it means ever since. 2. The Beyond, 1981. Lucio Fulci himself referred to The Beyond as an absolute film, aka one that doesn't follow a traditional narrative apparently. Where Uzumaki begins and ends with terrifying iconography, Fulci's surreal world is just a bunch of devastating images all the way through. The Beyond is packed with Lovecraftian cosmic horror, revolving around the Seven Doors Hotel in Louisiana, a haunted building with a troubled past that may contain a portal to the world of the dead. A spooky and simple enough premise, right? Or so it would seem until the whole concept of dream logic comes into play. A Lucio Fulci film is always going to have an air of confusing symbolism at play, but the Beyond's weirdness feels like the pinnacle of the lot. It's supposed to be disorientating as a descent into hell, but that doesn't make following its inconsistent plot any easier. Hey, at least there's some zombies in it. That's something. 1. Antichrist, 2009. Lars von Trier's icky Antichrist begins with a couple dealing with the grief of suddenly losing a child. Instead of just tears, however, we get blood instead. Willem Dafoe takes his wife to a remote cabin to attempt to heal her after the tragedy, but his psychological training isn't any use. As her pain moves from self-harm to abject violence, Antichrist proves that it is not for the faint at heart, but it's not just torture porn either. Von Trier was still suffering from depression during the shoot, and it feels like a nervous breakdown played out on screen as all its interpretations come across as contradictory. Is it about witchcraft or the idea of witchcraft? It's been called a misogynist movie and a feminist movie, a film about sexual hysteria and about feminine power. The countless women at the end don't seem to help clear things up either. Are they spectres of witches long gone, or revenants of women falsely accused? He has no idea, and neither do we. All we know is that spaffing blood is terrifying. And that's our list. What other horror movies have flown over your head? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. I've been Ash, and this has been What Culture. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and come back again soon for some more spine-tingling horror content. Thanks for watching.